Okay, so I want to start with the problem that this research project attempts to address. That is a misunderstanding. Indeed, the current dominant frameworks often misinterpret autistic expression as reinforcing stigma and exclusion. Instead, with this proof of concept study, we intend to investigate communicative differences between autistic and neurotypical individuals. And moreover, I want to explore whether philosophy can shift attitudes and implicit and even implicit attitudes toward from neurotypical individuals. So what we want to do is to work on neurotypical frameworks, not on autistic people. No, there is something wrong with the slide. Sorry, I'm very sorry for that.
No worries.
Because this is the last slide. I don't know why when there is the animation. Just a moment. I try again. Okay.
Try just clicking through
Okay.
them.
Okay, now they are working because it was strange. It was the last slide. So what I want to do today is to show you my aims and research question, the expected outcomes, the background, and also the limits of current research, the method and the timeline and the feedback. So this research project indeed has two interconnected aims. The first one is an exploratory aim that I've already introduced in the first part, talking about the problem, and also an intervention aim. So regarding the exploratory aim, the project investigates communication differences between autistic and neurotypical individuals, framing them, this is really important, as variation in perceptual, cognitive, and linguistic styles rather than a deficit. So I have prepared a set question for a set of research questions related to the exploratory aim. Okay, so the first one is, how do autistic and neurotypical communication styles differ? The second, how do neurotypical interpretive habits generate misreadings? And the last one is, what roles does a sensory processing play? Because an important thing I want to investigate is the relation between a communication language, that is a very important part, of course, of communication, and the sensory perception, because our hypothesis that if we experience the world in a different way, we tend to communicate in a different way. It doesn't mean that this is a deficit, is an issue, a problem, but it's just a different style. So intervention aim, we want to investigate whether engaging neurotypical participants in structured philosophical workshops can foster measurable conceptual and attitudinal change and promote more accurate, inclusive interpretation of autistic communication. And our questions related to this aim are, can philosophical reflection measurably alter neurotypical attitudes? Which workshop components are most effective? And also, do conceptual shift translate into more inclusive practices? So now I want to show you instead the expected outcomes. We expect a methodological innovation, so philosophy as empirical tool, conceptual reframing from deficit to diversity of perception and communication, bias reduction, including explicit and implicit attitudes, and integrated theoretical and practical framework for inclusive practice. And the last one, the last outcome we expect is a cultural shift in public narratives of autism. And I want to address this question now because I think it's really important to clarify the role of philosophy here in order to better understand the whole project. I have two answers for this question. The first one is a very personal answer that won't appear in the slide. The reason why philosophy is that I have an autistic brother, non-verbal autistic brother, and has also intellectual disability. I read a lot of psychological books about autism. They've been very helpful in order to better understand autism. But while I was writing my master dissertation about 𝘗𝘗𝘪𝘴, who is a philosopher included in this research project, and he researched about philosophy of language, perception, how perception affects language, and so on. I started understanding even better my brother after reading 𝘗𝘗𝘪𝘴, because I started reflecting on my own mechanism, on the language itself, on perception, and how I use language, why convention is so important to language, why even when we don't have a fully conventional language, the language is effective, even though it's not fully conventional. So the other answer is that the other answer for the question why philosophy is that our approach uses workshops and mixed method to enable the participants to rethink their own language and meaning before reflecting on autistic experience. And philosophy majors excel in verbal and logical reasoning, even after controlling for baseline ability. And a mixed meta-analysis confirmed that critical thinking training has a significant positive effect. So let's see now the background. I want to start with a traditional deficit-based model, because this is the model we try to move beyond this model, basically. Because according to this model, difficulties are interpreted as a lack of empathy or a lack of theory of mind. And this model reinforces, or I should say, reinforced in the past, because thankfully now things are different, the idea of autistic mind blindness. So according to these theories, autistic people are not able to understand the other's feeling, intentions, belief, and so on. And another important point that has been often overlooked is the relational dynamics. Thankfully, nowadays we have a shift in perspective. So this means that social difficulties are now considered reciprocal, not one-sided. And this means that misunderstandings arise between autistic and neurotypical people. And also, these claims are supported by recent empirical evidence where communication among autistic people and among neurotypical individuals have been studied and compared, and apparently there is not a deficit in autistic communication, but where the difficulties happens is in the relationship between an autistic person and a neurotypical individual. So, however, despite this increasing awareness about this mutual reciprocal misunderstanding, persistent stigma and bias, we still face stigma and bias toward autistic people. Indeed, the neurotypical observers often form rapid negative impressions, interpreting behaviors as awkward or lacking empathy. And although short co-produced interventions can improve explicit attitudes, implicit associations linking autism with the negative traits frequently persist. And this may have a very bad impact on autistic people, on their well-being, because autism is central to identity for many autistic people, and camouflaging to meet neurotypical norms can incur mental health costs, while a positive autistic identity predicts better well-being. So acceptance must come from the environment, not just from the individual. But what we should try to change is the environment, the work environment, the home environment, where the autistic person lives, works, and so on. So, which is our hypothesis? Our hypothesis is that there is not a deficit in autistic communication, and that misunderstanding, the reciprocal misunderstanding, comes from a different communication style. For example, autistic neurotypical mismatch reflect different ways of structuring meaning, or we could say different ways of conveying meaning. Because usually neurotypical communication relies on default comprehension inference is supported by implicit word and knowledge structure, what usually we call stereotypes. Instead, autistic communication usually presents more a non-standard but coherent communication, of what we usually call a standard, of course. For example, they can use script, echolalia, and the language gestalts. And talking about autistic communication, I would like to provide an example from my doctoral dissertation findings, because even though I graduated in philosophy, I earned a PhD in philosophy. For my philosophical dissertation, I collected data from interview with parents and siblings of autistic people, because I wanted to understand how neurotypicals experience language of their autistic relatives. And also I wanted to understand if language of their autistic relatives was conventional. I mean, if language was less conventional in comparison of language to their parents, siblings. And what I found out it is that many autistic people had the tendency to use single words to convey full meanings. For example, 2 or 3 guys use the term mom in order to convey a full sentence. Instead of say they would like to go to the bathroom, mom could mean the entire, could replace the entire sentence. Or another guy, for example, used environmental cues or environmental factors in order to make clearer a word or a concept, like, for example, the case of a lunchtime. In order to better understand the lunchtime or to refer to lunchtime, he tends to use the word light, because a light is a very important environmental factor, because we can see light, and this way he made it clearer what I wanted to refer to, namely to the lunchtime, because usually we have lunchtime when there is a light outside. So what I noticed the tendency to prioritize clarity and sensory grounding over convention. But what explained in my doctoral dissertation is that even though language or communication is less conventional, this doesn't mean that a language is less effective. It's just a different style, a different way to communicate. So I want to show you now limits of current research, and because I want also to to present how we'll address all of these limits of current research. First, there is a focus on highly verbal adolescents and adults. And many studies use video pre-recorded stimuli, and this limits insights into real-life interaction. And also context and peer relationships are often overlooked. And also studies on children with intellectual disability cannot generalize to children without intellectual disability. Other limits of current research are effects of familiarity are unclear, and because a shared experience can reduce or hinder understanding, so we should explore more this aspect, the aspect of family. And individual differences shape communication. For example, language production relates to verbal intelligence and working memory. So I think that also individual differences should be taken into account in this research project. And also most studies focus on explicit judgment, and implicit bias often are neglected. So what we want to do in this research project is, first of all, rethinking intervention targets, because most interventions train autistic people to adapt, but there is the growing call for a bi-directional approach. So what we should do is to have a research directed toward the neurotypical individuals, but not to change them, but to change what I call a neurotypical frameworks. So, regarding the method of my research project, I want to start with the exploratory aim. I want to explain you how I intend to accomplish this aim through this method. So, first of all, we need to understand the style variation, not deficits. So this means that we have to understand these differences as a difference in style. So we have to explore autistic neurotypical communication differences, and these align with the aim first. Namely, identify sources of misunderstanding. And also we need to assess baseline attitudes and assumptions in order to provide the reference point for measuring conceptual and attitudinal change. Instead, regarding intervention aim that is strictly related to the first aim, we will use a mixed method design to assess changes in attitudes, understanding, and communicative confidence, focus on how change occurs, conceptual decentering, reflection, and perspective taking, and also test philosophical engagement as a driver of conceptual change. So I want to talk now about the participant, because we will have 75 neurotypical individuals. Actually, they are the participants. And we have these subgroups, 25 family members, 25 educators, and 25 clinicians, or who usually work with autistic people, even though I think a clinician is not an accurate work. So I would be very happy to have some feedback also on the language. And also we will have 25 autistic participants, both verbal and non-verbal, but actually they are not participants like neurotypical individuals, because their contribute will be their lived experience. So they will help in the design of the workshop, and also we will help to understand if actually neurotypical attitudes will change after this philosophical workshop. Regarding workshop design, it's 6 per 90-minute weekly sessions, and will be delivered separately to families, educators, and clinicians, and will be, as I told before, co-designed with autistic individuals. So we have 2 phases in this workshop. The first phase is about conceptual decentering from weeks 1 to week 3. And during the first week, we will address the phenomenology of perception and sensory experience. So this is a very general introduction of phenomenology of perception and sensory experience, because what we need to do first is to reflect on this process itself. So how perception works, how sensory experience works, and to reflect on our own perception and sensory experience. The second week is about language, meaning, abstraction versus embodiment, and how all these terms are related, of course, with the help again of philosophy. So we'll reflect on how these terms are related to each other, how we use a language, and so on. And also the third week, we will try to destabilize the neurotypical as default assumptions. So then we have the second phase of the workshop, and this is the conceptual revision phase from week 4 to week 6. During week 4, we will address the double empathy problem, because we will start reflecting on autistic experience after reflecting on what on neurotypical frameworks. So week 5 will be about communication, perception, and sensory difference. So we will address the differences. And instead, week 6 is about applying a revised concept to real-world context. So again, we'll try to understand the differences as styles and not differences as deficits. So questionnaire will be helpful in order to track attitudinal change before, in the meantime, and after the workshop. And also we will have a session feedback to monitor engagement and the reflection. And as I told, this will be a mixed method research study. So we will have both qualitative and quantitative measures in order to qualitative measures to capture both immediate and long-term conceptual shift. So we will try to have a semi-structured interviews at 3 time points to track evolving views and key workshop insights. Post-intervention focus group to identify shared changes or resistance. And participant observation over 1 year in schools, community settings with autistic children and non-verbal adults. Because observation is really important to see if a conceptual change leads to better communication inclusion. So we need to see changes in neurotypical people, because I don't know if it's clear enough, but not in autistic people. So autistic people are involved in order to, in some way, measure neurotypical changes. Okay. Qualitative data, so interviews, focus group, reflective questionnaires, will be analyzed through thematic analysis, because I thought that this is the best way to analyze this kind of data. About a quantitative measure will be collected, as in the case of qualitative data, at 3 time points. And we will try to use implicit association test, even though there is a huge debate about this kind of measure. And also additional like autism acceptance scale, perspective taking, and cognitive empathy. Of course, implicit association test is to assess implicit attitudes, while the other 3 kind of measures are about explicit attitudes, in order to include both implicit and explicit attitudes, because I think, and as I showed you, is one of the limits of current research. So quantitative analysis will employ repeated measure ANOVA to assess differences across the 3 time points, quantifying both the magnitude and the direction of change. Mediation analysis process, macro model 4 will test whether perspective taking, a conceptual decentering, mediate the relationship between a philosophical engagement and attitudinal change. And this is another very important aspect of the research, that is the cross-group design, because we will try to keep groups separated during a workshop and the pre-intervention phases. So we will have a workshop for families, workshop for 6 weeks workshop, of course, for family, clinicians, educators, because I think that we need to change the language. Autistic people won't participate in a workshop, but they will be involved in designing the workshop. But there will be an optional cross-group focus group at the final stage in order to have some open discussion about what autistic people about this change, what neurotypical think also about this attitudinal change workshop, and so on. And this could enable also independent assessment of attitudinal and experiential change. The impact. I hope to, that this research project can produce improved, can create improved communication understandings in families, schools, clinics, and also enhance mutual understanding in autistic neurotypical interactions. And also another possible impact would be a strong interdisciplinary contribution. So philosophy plus psychology plus autism studies. This is a 3 years project. The first year is about exploring the differences in communication between autistic and neurotypical individuals, framework design, accessibility protocols, ethics approvals, and pilot workshop. While during the second year, we will have a full intervention delivery, immediate outcome evaluation, proposed assessment, ongoing thematic analysis. During the third year, we will have a follow-up, observation, and of course, this dissemination. And also, another important point is about challenges. First of all, we will involve autistic individuals because, this is the most important part of the project. Also, a way to address the challenges is to keep analysis of autistic data separate, and combines explicit, implicit, and behavioral measure is another way to address challenge. And we will use a plain language, even though because usually philosophy is very technical, sometimes we use a very complex language, but we will use a plain language, visual supports, alternative communication if it's necessary. What this approach offers: a bidirectional concept focused intervention, empirical test of philosophical engagement, moves from changing autistic people to changing interpretative frameworks. And this is the part about feedback. But before, I prefer to ask you if you have some question about the project, if everything is clear.
Well, I think it's brilliant. I mean, this is one of the reasons that I was glad you were coming to share this, because I don't know of any other studies at the moment that are really like this, where it's turning the tables so that it's non-autistic people that are being assessed for their attitudes. So I really appreciate that, and you can certainly count on my personal support, and I would guess the support of many people in the group.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. And also let me mention while I'm thinking of it, thank you for being so brave as to persist today. This was well worth making it to this point. I hope people have insights and suggestions. So I think since we have kind of a small group of 12, I don't think probably we need to raise our hands, maybe just try to take turns. Certainly raise your hand if you want to. We'll also be reading comments in the chat. If you put read before your comment, we'll make sure that gets read out loud to the group and gets a response from our presenter. Okay, I'll hand it over to folks.
Yeah, I was reading the comment. Thank you, because I'm reading very helpful suggestions in the comment. So I can go to the feedback. I can see you. So if someone raises hands, just let me know, because I see just my slide.
Can we do a couple questions first? How does hand up?
Were you mentioning me, Roger? Your microphone is really weak.
Yes, can you please share what you'd like to share? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. A couple of things really caught my attention. In particular, the phrase reciprocal misunderstanding, which strikes very true to me. And that there's a lot of things. I'm sure there'll be a lot of good discussion, but the S word was brought up, stigma, and there's a word that gets used that I actually find stigmatizing, and is the word wiring, and it's dehumanizing, and it relates to this discussion and into research, at least from my perspective. I wish they would just use the word function, and just brains can be identical physically and function differently. And I've seen enough scans of my own brain to know that it looks no different than any neurotypical brain, but it doesn't function like one, and it never has, and it probably never will. Another thing that came up to mind was the notion of training neurotypicals to read autistic people's nonverbal communication. Because one of the things I've noticed throughout my life, and I grew up without the ability to read nonverbal communication. It was very minimal. I had to train myself manually to read nonverbal communication. It's a really easy technique. Just ask people. It's like, what is that? What should you mean? But I don't want to go off topic here. But I've noticed that people with autism, their nonverbal cueing is different. And so verbal language is significant enough, but I've noticed that nonverbal communication is also different. So getting back to the reciprocal misunderstanding, this really can compound it. Another thing that was brought up I thought was excellent, because it was just in a podcast I heard the other day from the Uniquely Human podcast, and that's the use of one-word phrases that mean an entire sentence. And if that was the only thing we discussed here today, that would fill up the entire time for me. That's profound. I see the head shake. See, I can read nonverbal communication. But the use of one word to mean an entire phrase is profound. It's so important. I go through all these different phases. Sometimes I can't get more than one word out, and so it better be the right word. And so obviously there's a lot of all kinds of possible research that can be done that can, you know, be related or spin off what you're doing. So I just wanted to throw those things out for discussion. Thanks.
I'd like
To follow
really quick, just because it's relevant. One of the problems here, I think, is that neuronormative people say one thing and feel and think another.
and that is
Yes.
Huge disconnect. So you can even ask them, they may not even be aware. You can ask them, what does that mean? What are you really feeling or whatever? And they'll go ahead and do the verbal papering again. So I wanted to turn it over to Dr. Rizzo now, so you can comment.
No, thank you very much for your feedback and about function differently. About your first comment, I think that it's a very helpful because also function is a very it's a word that we use a lot in philosophy, so it's very helpful. And yeah, I'm reflecting because I'm a person needing to reflect slowly, very slowly, sorry, on things. I'm reflecting on what you said, also the one word to convey a full sentence. That is very profound, yeah. I don't know question also you want me to answer. If I missed something, I mean.
No, that's great. I've just brought these things up for discussion.
yeah.
I don't know what's going to come out. There's a whole mind here collectively, not just my personal perspective, but this group creates its own mind, and I simply want to get it, you know, the imagination of the collective group fired up. That's it. That's how my mind functions. It's not wired that way. It just functions that way.
Thank you.
I would underscore that so much research, of course, neuronormative research focuses on the individual, and what you said is so true, that we form a collective in a way that becomes more than the sum of the parts. And we don't, I'm guessing we don't depend on movement cues as much as we do that kind of holographic connection where we feel it, we know it, rather than assessing it secondarily, if that makes sense.
Would you like to go next?
Yes. Maybe just to follow up on what you said, I think that for me also I'm autistic. I'm also an autism researcher. But personally, I think the sound or the tone in which something is said is probably one of the most difficult things for me to work out, because the content I can kind of deal with, and I can deal with the fact that the content is often different to what's meant, but putting the sound in is, I don't know, it's just really hard to, yeah, anyway. But what I wanted to say actually, Elizabeth, was more sort of from a scientific point of view, because I've applied to the Wellcome Trust before as well, and sort of methods-wise. One thing was I put a paper in further up, or like a report, in case like you just sort of like pitching that idea, because I think it's a really brilliant project, but I think that a lot of people might not see the point in that because they come from it from a different point of view of like what's in it for me or whatever. So I wonder if maybe if you make a financial point, that even if you're not interested at all in autistic people or supporting them, that from a financial point of view it might be useful. Like you can probably find other sort of examples like that too. You just sort of like pitch it to the wider reviewer board. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention was both from a scientific point of view, but from a cultural point of view as well, the language. So, for example, because you kept referring to neurotypical, and I think, first of all, there's a kind of cultural issue around, do we call someone neurotypical or not, and what does that mean? But also from a methods point of view, it's really important to say, if you mean someone non-autistic, which could mean that maybe they are not autistic, but they have ADHD, or they have all sorts of other things or experiences, or whether you mean someone neurotypical who, I think it's probably really difficult to find someone who's really neurotypical in all these categories, but so methods-wise, I think that's really important to clarify, because that kind of then also links to a lot of covariates that you'll probably need to consider, right? If you're doing this research, I mean, you're at the University of East Anglia, right? So you're based in Cambridge, I'm assuming?
It's my host university, but I earned a PhD in Scotland.
I'm not there at the moment.
I'm in Italy.
Okay. But like you're just sort of the environment where you're in and the socioeconomic status of your participant and the background, and a lot of these things will probably matter hugely as well. So I don't know if you're like addressing that as well, but I think there's also multicollinearity as well with other factors, such as, for example, mental health difficulties, education, and all of that. So like I said, I don't know if you're including that, but that's probably important to mention. But yeah, I'm so glad you're doing this project. It sounds really cool, and I'm so happy that you're doing it. Best of luck. I'm rooting for you.
So do you think that I need also a non-autistic person to co-design the workshop, for example?
So neurotypical.
So do you think that I need also that a neurotypical individual should be involved in the co-design of the workshop?
I don't know. I don't know if I can. I don't think I can say that or not. It's just I don't want to tell you what to do anyway. There is more of an idea of something to consider.
And thank you for the link. Thank you very much.
Would you like to go?
Yes, thank you. Elisabetta, le ringrazio per il suo intervento oggi e per il lavoro che sta proponendo. I am a non-autistic autism anthropologist myself. I do not have much background in philosophy, and I did miss the beginning of the presentation, so I apologize if you already answered this. But I have two questions. One, which philosophers do you find do good work in the area of philosophy and autism? And two, do you find the cross-cultural metaphor for autistic communication useful? So is autistic and non-autistic communication similar to like Scottish, Italian cross-cultural communication differences, or is that not a good metaphor? Thank you.
Thank you very much, because actually I didn't mention philosophers, a specific philosopher in my presentation. Actually, I will try to include the two philosophers I approached in my PhD dissertation. They are 𝘗𝘗𝘮 and Whitehead, for one main reason, because they both studied language as language and perception as the two related things. According to them, perception has a huge impact on the language, on the way we communicate. And especially Whitehead explains perception, a language as a way. He explained a language related to perception because perception can help clarify what we say, what we hear. And so these are the philosophers I'm going to use, but since it's still a work in progress, I will refine the part about philosophers with my mentor. For this reason, I clarified that I took my PhD in Scotland, not at the University of East Anglia, because I'm still in that process where I'm arranging something with my new supervisor about which philosophers to include. But for sure, I will include 𝘗𝘶 and Whitehead. Regarding the second question, I think that it's a good metaphor, but not if we take into account the language between Scottish Italians, but between, for example, English people and Scottish people. I think that it can be a very good metaphor because, I mean, we all use the same language. It's impossible that someone uses a private language. According to Wittgenstein, it's impossible because we always refer to something that a word we share with other people. But at the same time, we can do that with a very different style. This is what happened in the UK. Sometimes you see someone from Scotland, someone from England, they use the same word, but in a different way, with a different style and a different context. So I think that it could be very good metaphor. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Anybody else have a question, or comment, or anything else to say? Go for it.
Hi, can you all hear me? Yeah. Hi. Yeah. I think maybe you addressed this, but I wasn't able to completely focus 100%. So my question is how to incorporate some of the disabling characteristics that can come from our autism with mutual respect for a difference in communication style. So a personal example is I, especially since like a burnout, a really severe burnout I had, my cognitive processing at times, it's intermittent, is slower than it used to be. And my sensory processing issues impact this so greatly that people who have known me for a long time, I've had to like have a talk with my brother about why sometimes I do need him to repeat himself, or if he's trying to explain something to me. And it's difficult because it goes into, for me personally, and I assume for many autistic people, desperately wanting to be respected, but also having people understand, I do sometimes, I might need you, if this is complicated, to write it down so I can have it to look at. I might need, if it's a stressful environment, you know, I'm going to have to accommodate those needs. And he's my brother, he loves me, so he's accommodating those. But I've had to have a couple of conversations about, I can still see sometimes the frustration of, wait, aren't you listening to me? Which is hard because, you know, it gets into the rejection sensitivity and all of that, and then your own self-esteem of, wait, I used to be able to handle this, I used to push through everything. And it's so common for autistic people to go through a period or periods in their lives of burnout where truly my capability is not always what it was, you know, especially to people who have known me. And so how to incorporate that and understanding that sometimes there is a true disability and a true, I know we don't like to use the word deficit, but just from my own personal experience, sometimes it is harder for me than it used to be to do certain things. So how to incorporate that into a respect and a sort of an egalitarian model, if that makes sense.
Thank you. I mean, it does make sense, and I think that this is the most difficult part to incorporate, because I experienced this myself with my brother. When the environment is particularly stressful, it's more difficult to interact with him. And for this reason, I think that philosophy should help understand, first of all, ourselves, because we need to understand how we engage with the environment. We take for granted a lot of things. So for example, we take for granted that if the environment is stressful, we can just go to another room or something like that. But we need to understand that it's not the same for other people. And I think that the best way to incorporate these autistic traits, as you said, in this mutual misunderstanding, is first to reflect on our own frameworks, on our own mechanism process, and then try to understand why environment can be more stressful for someone else. But I want to provide another example, that sometimes I find an environment more stressful than my brother. So I need to use this aspect of myself to understand my brother. I have a huge fear of flying. And when I have to fly, I am petrified. And also I can't eat, I can't drink. My brother's experience is the same thing with the other things that we can't understand. For example, there is a place where you can eat pizza. When this place is closed, for him is a very stressful situation. He can't handle that situation. And I always tell my parents, I can understand him, because I feel the same when I have to fly. So what philosophy can do is to understand that even when there is an attitude, behavior that is not clear to us, we need to reflect, we need to be open to the other's attitude, because we can experience the same in another context. So, but this is a crucial point I need to reflect on, because I think that this is the most difficult part. But thank you very much for your question, your feedback.
Want to say something else?
Thanks, Roger. Yeah, a bunch of things came up to mind listening to everybody. One thing I'm going to throw out there, so there's an autistic spectrum, and I've never heard the word neurotypical spectrum. I have a background in criminal prosecution for federal tax crimes. And one of the things we were always looking for is called the bright line test. Because without a bright line, you don't know if somebody's broken the law and you have a prosecutable case or not. I don't see that as particularly any different from knowing anything, where you have to make a decision or a determination whether somebody's autistic or neurotypical. And I don't think there is a bright line. I think it's a blurry line. I also think that any number of people, and I know for a fact myself, I tell people I walk between worlds. That is, one day I'll be like just deeply into an autistic state. The next day it'd be like it never happened, and you'd never know that it was any different. And I should use the word functionally any different, since I brought that up earlier, because I want to get rid of that word wiring so badly from our lexicon, it's not funny. I don't think we realize how, anyway, I don't want to go off on that tangent. So bright line test, spectrum, autistic on one side or in one sphere, neurotypical in another, yet the two spheres are not separated from each other by a vacuum of space. One goes into the other. And I've known people who are just diagnosably, God knows what, in the DSM and ICD, and yet the next day they're functioning better than the best normally functioning people. And so this gets ignored. I've never seen it addressed, in fact. I want to throw some other things in with that. One of them is dialectical thinking. And I believe maybe it's an attribute of being autistic, but I'm a dialectical thinker. And so I can think completely opposite things with equal validity simultaneously, bring it up in a discussion, and my, let's just say, for lack of a better word, neurotypical counterpart has a meltdown. So they don't have an autistic meltdown. They have a neurotypical meltdown. Because I'm saying opposites simultaneously with equal validity, and they can't argue against it, especially if they use some critical thinking and realize both points are equally valid simultaneously, not one to the exclusion of the other. And it's a very hard thing to, I've found historically, to deal with people, since we're talking about philosophy shifts and understanding the autistic experience. And part of my autistic experience is not only can I think of things that are opposite simultaneously with equal validity, I can think of things that are mutually exclusive, which means there's actually more than, it's not a binary anymore. Now it's a multiplicity. And that really gives, to use the word it gives the so-called NTs 𝘗𝘩𝘏𝑔𝘐𝑠. And so I wanted to throw that out. And the another thing I wanted to throw out is the effect of gaslighting on autistic people. And God knows I have been gaslit to death throughout my life, going all the way back to when I first became aware of autism back in the 1960s. And of course, in that era, it wasn't autism, it was childhood schizophrenia, for which I was threatened with institutionalization and being given antipsychotics as a 9-year-old. But luckily, because I'm on the so-called Asperger side of things, I was very articulate verbally, and so I became not neurotypical. I became neurosupertypical, where I was, more neurotypical than the typical neurotypical person was. And so and that goes with this dialectical thinking, where how can I be beyond neurotypical and simultaneously be using one-word sentences? In one moment, I'm like down to one-word sentence, and then the next moment, I'm doing superpositioned ideas in single sentences. And so that's part of my, autistic experience. So, for looking for future philosophy shifts, these are some things I just wanted to throw out because it's my experience. And I just wanted to share it with everyone for whatever, value it has. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think an interesting philosophical question, and I'd love for both you, Dr. Rizzo, and to weigh in on this, is can you teach empathy? I'm not personally, I don't think so. I hate to be pessimistic. I'll let you guys actually say what you think.
Can I chime in on that? I forgot to put that in my talking points. So something I hear a lot of is, what's the word? Mind blindness and theory of mind. Something I was studying before I finally broke down and had myself tested for autism was reflective function, as described by Fonagy and Bateman in the UK. And I've listened to both of them talk, and that really hit home with me because with the inability to read nonverbal communication comes an absence of reflective function, meaning I cannot, in my mind, recreate the experience of another person's mind. Yet I know the other person has an experience in their mind, in their imagination. And so they have a whole inner world of images and interpretations and everything else that an imagination can create, in addition to their emotions and feelings and impulses and so forth. And so do I. But I'm unable to recreate theirs in my mind. And I can't even recreate my own, which makes reflecting on my own mental state and then modeling that, creating a mental imaginary scenario of my mental state and the other person's mental state simultaneously in my own imagination. But I do know it enough to know that it's not there. And so
I so appreciate your enthusiasm. I have an auditory processing challenge, and this is a lot. So I was asking for Dr. Rizzo, and because that's about as much as I'm going to be able to take in. If you could understand that, I appreciate it.
absolutely. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Sorry, can you repeat your question, because I was focusing on talk. It was very interesting.
Yes, and hopefully he can come back and finish. I just wanted to hear from you from a philosophical point of view. Can we teach empathy? I personally don't think we can, but I'd love to have both of you weigh in on that.
Just to chime in.
Yeah, I think she left. To be honest, I don't think we can teach empathy. I don't think philosophy can teach empathy. And I think also that you can train someone to be empathetic. I think that you can not teach people. This is the reason why I use the word the workshop, because it's more interactive. But I think that we can reflect about things that we usually take for granted. I don't think that we can find a solution. And by solution, I mean that we can that environment can be more inclusive with autistic people because we become more empathetic. I think we need to use logic. We need to understand that there are different ways to express the same thing. And also, I'm going to say something that maybe is not very nice, but I don't think that autistic people need more empathetic people. I think autistic people need more respectful people. They are two very different things. And also, one thing, for example, I always notice in my life, my brother is one of the most empathetic person I ever met. Nobody taught him to be empathetic because he is the most empathetic in the family. So, I mean, I think we need to reflect on language process, perception process, and how these things work. This is what I don't think philosophy can teach empathy. This is my I mean, this is my personal opinion. I think that empathy is something that can't be taught, to be honest. I agree with you.
Thank you.
Say that again, please. Did you say you don't think empathy can be taught?
Yeah.
Is that what? Okay, thank you. I also have an auditory processing difficulty.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Most of the autistic people I know, I'll say that it seems to be part of our cultural foundation, this kind of very deep, abiding, innate empathy. And as of late, I've come to the sad conclusion that neuronormative culture is built on a lack of that, that there is, I mean, I hate to say it, I really hate to say it, that foundational instead is kind of casual cruelty and exploitation. Yeah, I think that's where I am. I'm always subject to change my mind, and I don't want to be hard on people. But if that is the case, that seems really significant as we go forward trying to study the different parts of the problem.
Yeah, thank you very much for your feedback. And also, I think that because I prepared a list of questions, but it's long, I don't think that, I mean, it's up to you, but I don't think we have enough time to address these questions in order to have feedback. If you agree with that, I can send you an email.
Yeah, we also, Roger just always posts, he just put in the comments, the links that people can follow to continue the conversation. So you'll definitely want to check on those. Hopefully,
yeah.
Yeah, and certainly email exchange. If you want to put your email on the screen, people can certainly get the list or just write you their thoughts, if that works for you.
Yeah, I'm writing down my email address. And so if you're interested, you want to be involved, I can send you this list of questions for feedback. And also, I didn't understand if the conversation, we can continue the conversation now or in another moment.
We generally speaking have come up with the hour and a half as our hard stop, but this was an unusual situation. My mind is getting tired, but I'm happy to continue if people want to go on.
I do have
For me,
another
I
meeting
mean,
to go to, so maybe what we could do is, I think if we could get those the feedback questions, maybe we can circulate those, and if people want to read sometime after.
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't hear you. Sorry.
Oh, he has to go to another meeting. So he was
Yeah.
saying we should probably go ahead and end for today. But he brought up that we could also post those questions that you have on Facebook and our other social media platforms. And then you would probably have a really huge response to that if we just did a dedicated post to that. So we can do that.
Yeah, thank you very much. It sounds great.
Yeah, thank you again. This was really fascinating, and I so appreciate the work you're doing. And let's please keep in touch because I want to stay collaborative on this project.
Thank you very much. I don't know how to thank you because for me it was a huge opportunity. Thank you.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. Thank you. I really appreciate you in return. So we have a session coming up tomorrow with our own Becca Cook, who's doing Plant Band, which is her work making music with plants' impulses and consciousness. Roger and I will certainly brainstorm between now and then about how to make this safer, and then over Christmas break, the holiday break, we'll put as many safeguards in place as possible and start fresh in the new year with those protocols. So thank you, everyone. Very much appreciate you staying.
Thank you. Bye.